It never should have ended up like this. I saw the news stories, the disappearing people, the damn profile and MO itself. The so-called Angel of Death, the good Dr. Locklear, as so many had taken to calling him. The madman that decided to take vigilante justice into his own hands and fled from police custody, vanishing like a vapor upon the wind. Bodies turning up mutilated with immense precision of a trained surgeon's hand. The most recent, horribly mangled body discovered in an abandoned meat factory. I knew of this, all of this, and yet, here I am. But it's not right. I'm not like them. This has to be a mistake. My name is Jeannie Winters, and the only thing I am guilty of is trying to make friends. I can't help that I'm socially awkward and sometimes might unintentionally make people a little uncomfortable, but that's hardly a crime worthy of Locklear's brand of justice, now is it? So, why am I here? I nearly sobbed the last question through the cruel bars that locked me into an inhumane iron cage that was my prison. The man lying motionless in the gurney across the room from me groggily nodded in agreement, though I wasn't entirely sure just how much of my story he was taking in, as he had clearly been drugged with some sort of powerful sedative in his IV drip. However, that didn't really matter. Just being able to talk to someone, make my story be heard, comforted me immensely. And if I was going to make it out of here alive, I needed to keep my resolve up. So whether my involuntary neighbor was truly listening or not, I decided to start from the very beginning. I guess you could call the last few years of my life turbulent. Bouts of bad luck, running into bad people, whatever you want to call it, but I always tried my best to keep my chin up. First, it was Sam. 2 years ago, Sam was supposed to be my best friend. I cared for him so much. He was my best friend, my world. I'd even go so far as to say that I fell in love with him. But then, one day, he just suddenly shut me out cold, told me he wanted me to stay far away from him and never speak to him again. I was devastated. I wanted to know why. What had changed? What had I done? Damn it, he owed me at least an explanation. But I never got one. He dropped off the radar, and with that, the best friend I had ever known and had relied on so much was just gone. I was alone and nothing could be done. Then it was Damien. He drifted into my life about a year ago. I had always been a bit sweet on Damien, if I'm honest. His gorgeous white blonde hair and deep amber eyes would make any young lady's heart swoon. I really thought I had a chance with him. I mean, I may not be next top model gorgeous, but I think would be fair enough to say I'm pretty cute. I've got bright hazel eyes, silky chestnut hair, and sure, I guess you could say I'm a little on the chubby side, but that's just all the more to love, darn it. But most importantly, I've got a huge heart, and that heart belonged to Damien. But I should have guarded it more closely, because just like Sam, Damien left me too. One day, we were close friends, and the next, he was just pushing me away, demanding I never speak to him again. I was heartbroken. Had he taken so poorly to the idea of me possibly caring more for him than just friends? This was just cruel. And once again, I was alone and more confused than ever. Finally, just a few months ago, there was Gabriel. Of all these heartbreaks, his left me the most shattered. If I had thought my puppy love for Damien was strong, Nothing could have prepared me for how hard I fell for Gabriel. He was everything I ever wanted and needed. Kind, understanding, there for me when I needed someone to vent to. I fell in love with him before I realized what his cruel intentions for me actually were. I should give you some context. Gabriel and I work at the same company. It's a large corporate monster with a million different departments and floors, so it's a wonder our paths even crossed in the first place. Gabriel worked down in marketing while I was over in the tech department. We were on totally different floors, so us running into each other in the 4th floor break room seemed like the divine intervention of fate at the time. See, his entire floor had to evacuate because someone had burned a bag of popcorn in the 3rd floor break room microwave. So as a result, he came up to my floor for his lunch break. And despite my general shyness, we actually hit it off immediately. We spent our entire lunch hour chatting and laughing and having a great time getting to know one another. I knew that after Damien, I should be more careful in letting my heart run wild so quickly for someone I hardly knew. But Gabriel was just so perfect, and I was in love from day one. I'm sad to inform you, however, that Gabriel never returned the sentiment. In fact, the entire time he had been playing me for a fool. Apparently, Gabriel was a pretty popular guy around the office, known especially for his wild stories around the water cooler. It seems he only ever gave me the time of day because he figured it would make another great story. You know, the crazy obsessive chick from upstairs who was stalking and harassing him. All I ever did was try and be kind and friendly. Sure, maybe he read into my terribly awkward attempts at being cute and flirting as uncomfortable, but certainly nothing near the horrible tale he began weaving about me. Soon, all the men in the office would avoid me and give each other looks as I passed. I knew they thought I was crazy. Hell, anyone would think that after they heard the tales Gabriel was weaving for his own sick entertainment. He even got me in trouble with management, accusing me of inappropriate conduct. I was absolutely mortified. Since when does trying to be friendly count as inappropriate conduct? The whole thing eventually led to court, but as it was completely unfounded and ridiculous, the judge fortunately sided with me and Gabriel was finally out of my life. I quit my job shortly after in search of something new. The whole experience had just left such a bad taste in my mouth, and honestly, I was just ready to move on. After the first night on the town in ages, I returned to my cozy apartment. Night had long since fallen and everything was dark. Before I could even hit the light switch, my heart froze. A dark mass came barreling toward me through the darkness. A pair of strong arms wrapped around me and took a fistful of my hair, forcing my head back. There was a sudden, sharp pain in my neck as I realized I was being injected with something. In my last conscious moments, my eyes fixed on the familiar face I had seen splashed across the news just months ago. It was Dr. Evander Locklear, his piercing blue eyes gleaming down, seeming to almost glow in the surrounding dark, all the while flashing a wolfish grin at me. It was truly unfair that such a handsome being be so cruel and dangerous. His smooth olive tone, his carved cheekbones, his long, silky raven hair. Had he not been splashed across the news and a literal intruder in my home, I would have thought him some sort of model. Oh, there I go again. I really do seem to have a weakness for good-looking men, and it really does seem to be the root of all my problems. But before I could react or further introspect, my thoughts fluttered weakly, and then there was only darkness. And that's the last thing I remember before waking up in this dim, freezing room. I hadn't seen the doctor since our first encounter, and it had been at least an hour or two. I should have been terrified, but I was honestly too frustrated for that. He had made a terrible mistake. I know he frequently targets people who escape punishment unfairly from the legal system, but I was actually innocent. I wasn't like those monsters he killed. In fact, before this very encounter, I had actually kind of sympathized with the guy. So why this? It just had to be a mistake. Maybe I could reason with him when he returned. After all, before he went off the deep end, he was a doctor. There's still gotta be a bit of logic and rationale left in there. I looked over to my sedated friend eagerly, but he just sort of rolled his head back and drooled. Okay, fair. I guess I can't blame him for zoning out of my ramblings given his condition. But suddenly, he jerked his head upright, like a zombie snapping back to life. He starts to stir, slowly at first, but within a moment he appeared to be coming back to his senses. Amazingly, Locklear must have thought whatever he had given this man should have rendered him entirely immobile because there were no straps or restraints holding him down. With a swift motion, he yanked the IV out of his arm and forced himself into a sitting position. It took only a few moments more before he was slowly attempting to stand. He must have noticed my jaw hit the floor because he turned to me with a weak and still slightly groggy smile before speaking.
That nutjob seems to have overlooked a major loophole in his sick little plans. I've messed around with just about every substance you can imagine. Over enough time, you sort of build up a tolerance for it. Nice story, by the way. What did you say your name was? I'm Craig.
I let out a great sigh of relief. Not only were the prospects of escape looking up, but now I wasn't alone in this anymore. Sure, this Craig could be a horrible, violent criminal, but then again I'm here, so maybe not. I decided that regardless of Craig's identity outside of these walls, as far as I was concerned, in here, the enemy of my enemy was my friend. Jeannie, I responded with a smile. I'm so glad you're all right. Do you think you might be able to help me get out of this cage?
Of course. Let's bust that thing open and then both of us get the hell out of this nasty place. Not sure how long we have till Doc comes back, but that cage doesn't look too sturdy.
After taking a moment to make sure his balance was steady, Craig slowly began to wobble over to me. When he reached the cage, he looked the bars up and down before stopping at one stretch of slightly rusted bars.
That looks like the weakest point. If I can just find something to help you pry it open, we should be golden. He
grunted optimistically. However, before he could even turn around to begin searching for such an object, my ears were met with a sickening crunch, and I felt a slight misting of blood spatter across my face. I immediately recoiled when I realized what had happened. Locklear had returned. He had been as silent as a lion stalking its prey that neither of us had noticed him slide into the room behind Craig. He looked like a monstrous bird in his billowing coat and blood-stained plague doctor's mask. My breath caught in my throat at the sight. In his hand, he held a heavy old metal pipe. He had wielded it much like a Louisville slugger, bringing it to crack down on Craig's skull. He had, however, restrained himself enough that it didn't knock him out or kill him. Simply cut open his face and downed him. Before Craig could gather himself and fight back, Locklear had him in a savage headlock, pulling up another syringe to sedate him. Whatever it was must have been even stronger than the last, because Craig went limp in his arms. It was then that I realized just how large Locklear actually was. Craig was by no means a small man, yet Locklear seemed to dwarf him as he supported his limp form in his arms. My guess was that he had to be nearly 6.5 feet, maybe more, and a whole lot of raw muscle mass. clearly not someone I would have had any hopes of fighting off with my short, soft body. I watched in helpless horror as Locklear placed Craig back onto the gurney, this time being sure to securely strap him into place. Craig remained ever defiant, though, hissing insults at the doctor.
I bet you think you look real cool in that ugly thing. Well, you don't. You're just a coward hiding behind a stupid, outdated mask. You're not man enough to face me eye to eye.
Craig roared through increasingly slurred words as the sedative set in further.
Stupid.
Locklear repeated, almost dejectedly, finally speaking.
I'll have you know that I don't wear this thing to look cool. I just found that thanks to human psychology, people think that it looks pretty spooky. And spooked people are easier to hunt. They don't think straight.
Well, I ain't scared. I've killed people far worse than you.
Craig roared through increasingly slurred words as the sedative set in further.
Oh, wonderful. Then I guess this isn't necessary anymore. I really must tinker with the right goggle. It's starting to fog up something terrible.
Locklear babbled as he raised a gloved hand to remove the large, hawkish mask and secure it to one of the straps on his coat. His cold, blue eyes scanned the room. His gaze lingered on me for a moment, as if he was contemplating saying something to me. But suddenly his attention was drawn back to Craig, who in a desperate act of rebellion had spat in Locklear's distracted face. This, clearly, was a terrible mistake. Locklear froze for a moment and just stared at Craig, not with rage or disgust, but the most terrifying look of silent, calm fury that chilled me to the bone. Then, with a swift motion, he wiped his cheek and turned his heel back toward my cage, where he had dropped the pipe in the struggle to sedate Craig. Finally, he broke his silence.
Now, Mr. Evans, we already had this little conversation about my thoughts on rudeness.
It was horrifying. The way his voice could sound so cheerful and polite, but at the same time have such an intense, underlying coldness that it shook your core. If words could cut, these surely would have gutted Craig entirely.
And what, pray tell, did you think you were doing? Getting out of bed like that? No, that simply won't do at all. No, we can't have that. You're on strict bed rest until your big operation. Looks like we're going to have to do something about that.
His grip tightened on the now blood-spattered pipe, and he took a few steps closer. Despite the sedative immobilizing him, I could see the terror in Craig's eyes, and he began to mumble in protest and weakly push against the straps.
Let's see. As far as your procedure goes, your legs really are of no consequence, so it's no problem if I just...
There was another sickening crunch as Locklear swung the pipe down on Craig's right leg. He had used a far greater amount of strength this time, hardly holding back at all. I had to avert my eyes from the bruised, bloody mess that was now Craig's leg and fight the urge to start crying and gagging. It was clear he would no longer be getting up and out of his gurney. And despite being heavily sedated, it did nothing to stop the horrific screams and wails that emanated from his heaving form.
Oh my! Would you look at the time? We're nearly due to begin.
Locklear chirped in deranged glee. He slowly began releasing the brakes on the gurney, preparing to roll it out of the room. I realized that once he had done whatever heinous things he was planning on doing to Craig, it was going to be just him and I might not have enough time to figure my way out of here. So, thinking fast, I called out to him. "Wait," I stuttered, finding my voice. "Hello there, Dr. Locklear. I can see you're very busy cleaning off the underside of society and all that, but there's clearly been some sort of mistake here. Not that I'm blaming you, of course, but I don't understand why I'm here when I haven't exactly done anything wrong." He froze in his tracks, but didn't turn to face me right away. Simply spoke over his shoulder in my general direction.
Oh, really now, dearie?
He cooed softly. Was he going to give me a chance and hear me out? Not wanting to let the moment pass, I quickly spoke up again. Yes, sir. Obviously, I can respect the good work you do, protecting the cities around here, cleaning up the violent messes that slipped through the system. I really do admire what you're trying to do. But the thing is, I really don't think I should be here. Perhaps you misread my file or something. I really haven't done anything wrong.
Oh, really now, dearie?
He cooed softly at me. Was he going to actually give me a chance and hear me out? Not wanting to let the moment pass, I quickly spoke up again. Yes, sir. Obviously, I can respect the good work you do, protecting the cities around here, cleaning up the violent messes that slipped through the legal system. I really do admire what you're trying to do. But the thing is, I really don't think I should be here. Perhaps you misread my file or something. I really haven't done anything wrong.
Ah, I see. Must have been a terrible mix-up, Miss Winters. I'll definitely have to talk to HR about that one.
His voice trailed off as he began pushing the gurney away again, leaving me behind in the dark room, all alone. Was he making a joke? Just messing with me? I was so confused. What was happening? I wanted answers, but I didn't have time for such luxuries. I needed to escape, and fast. As his footsteps echoed and faded down the corridor outside my holding room, I began to scan the surrounding surfaces for ideas. My heart leaped in my chest. That now gruesome, bloodied pipe that he had used to cripple Craig was lying on the floor, not too far away from my cage. After having smashed Craig's femur, he had simply dropped the pipe like it was nothing, and it had amazingly rolled toward my cage. I stretched out my arm through the bars as far as I could reach, but hesitated a moment. All of this seemed too easy. I couldn't help but get the sense that he had done that on purpose, that he was playing with me. It served no purpose to the well-thought-out plan of an evil genius to leave tools behind that would aid the escape of your victims. But then again, Locklear felt less like an evil genius and more like a savage predator, confident and bored, wanting to add another layer to hunt his prey for his own sick amusement. However, whether I was giving him exactly what he wanted or not, I wasn't going to just sit in this cage and wait for certain death. I would rather take my odds playing his game. It was difficult, but I just barely managed to extend my arm and shoulder far enough to fish the pipe back into the cage. And using the weak spot Craig had previously pointed out, I knew where to use the pipe to apply pressure to pry the sucker open. Craig. Poor Craig. Thanks to him, I would be getting out of here. Meanwhile, who knew what kind of horrors he was being subjected to? I had to push the thought from my mind because I simply couldn't afford to lose focus now. I wedged the pipe between the rusted bars and used every ounce of strength in my body to pry until I felt the cage give. Using both legs, I then continuously kicked until the side of the cage was bent out enough for me to squeeze through. Sliding out onto the filthy floor like a wounded animal, I gasped for air and tried to calm myself as I picked myself up and assessed the damage. Well, I was still wearing my clothes from the previous night. Well, I assumed it was the previous night. In truth, I had no idea just how long I had been here while unconscious. Regardless, I noticed the remnants of my hoodie draped over the side of another gurney. It must have been destroyed in the initial struggle. I ran over to it, praying that my cell phone was still in the pocket. However, A flashback to the previous night reminded me of the clank of my phone to the cold, hardwood floor of my apartment as Locklear grabbed me. Odds are, it was still there. Damn it. Okay, so no cell phone, but that didn't mean I had to give up hope yet. Thinking quickly, I snatched up the now slightly bent pipe I had used to free myself and held it close. At least I had a weapon now, and given the horrifying sights around me, I was going to need it. The dim room I had been held in appeared as if its sole purpose was to hold victims. There were several iron cages and a few more gurneys scattered about, all empty at the moment, but I was certain that was not often the case. Given how dark and musty it was, it must have been below street level, like a basement or something. The only window I could see was very small, up near the ceiling, and it had been boarded over securely. Not wanting to linger too long in this horrible place, I worked up the courage to go through the doorway that Locklear had previously pushed Craig's gurney through, and, to my surprise, the corridor that met my eyes couldn't have been any more different from the filthy, dark room I was leaving behind. It was a long, well-lit hallway that looked almost spotlessly clean. It brought memories of a hospital to mind. Shaking the sick irony off, I looked up and down the corridor, trying to decide which way to go. Straining my ears to listen closely, I could make out the sounds of movement down the corridor to my left, so with swift decisiveness, I took a sharp right. Ahead of me, I could see a closed door. I had no idea where it led, but perhaps it would be my ticket out of here. Maybe an emergency exit or a fire escape. I was, of course, wrong in my hopeless assumption. The room that met my eyes was not a place of rescue, but one of mind-numbing dread. It looked as though I was standing in the middle of a small morgue. All along one side of the room was row after row of freezer boxes. I decided I really didn't need to look inside, but I guessed Locklear was storing far worse than frozen pizzas down here. Gazing over to the opposite wall, I noticed many little rectangles set into the wall. After a moment, it registered that they were the sliding refrigerated compartments in which morticians store bodies. Once again, my curiosity was overruled by the rising urge to get sick in the back of my throat. However, at the far end of the room there appeared to be a large industrial door, like one from a shop garage. I yanked on it with all my might, but I suppose I knew from the get-go that it wasn't going to be that easy. Of course the button to open it was behind a clear plastic lockbox. Of course I needed a key, and of course, even if I tried to smash it open with a pipe, Locklear would be flying down the corridor faster than the door would open enough for me to flee. That is, if the door even led to freedom, and not just another room of horrors. My hopes couldn't help but deflate a bit. I would have to find another way out. With a determined sigh, I turned around, preparing to head back out to the hallway from which I came. However, right as I began walking, I froze in my tracks. I hadn't noticed it upon my first inspection of the room, because it fitted so well into the wall and was slightly obscured by the wall of morgue drawers, but I definitely saw it now. One of those small, old-fashioned mini lifts that could be used to bring trays and things up and down between floors. They certainly weren't made for people, but desperate times called for desperate measures, and this one looked just big enough to try squeezing into. Sucking in my gut as much as I could, I somehow managed to contort myself into the tiny lift. With a strained arm, I reached out and hit the call button. The sound of old machinery creaking and straining met my ears, and the lift started to wiggle a bit and complain, but after a moment, it started to rise. My heart jumped for joy as I very slowly watched the morgue room begin to disappear as I rose into the elevator shaft. However, just as there were only mere inches of the room still in view, The lift let out a terrible groan and lurched. Suddenly, I realized it had stopped and I was stuck in place. It seemed the weight of a human being, let alone a chubby one, was just too much for the small lift. It wasn't the claustrophobic conditions of being stuck in the lift that scared me. No, what made my blood run cold in that moment was the loud, metallic creak that had clearly echoed through the morgue room, no doubt having at least somewhat traveled down the corridor to wherever Locklear had been sculping. As if in response to my most dreaded thoughts, the sound of echoing footsteps could be heard approaching.